Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the Philippines files yet another diplomatic protest and summons the Chinese ambassador over the latest aggression against Philippine vessels in the West Philippine Sea. China is unfazed and even accuses the Philippines of intruding into its territory. And was the water cannon incident part of China's calculated plan to assert its claims in the West Philippine Sea? Coast Guard spokesperson Commodore Jay Tarriela and security expert Powell join us live. The Philippine government summons Chinese Ambassador Huang Xilian to convey another diplomatic protest, this time for firing water cannons at Philippine vessels on a resupply mission near the Ayungin Shoal. China continues to assert its claims in the West Philippine Sea despite the 2016 arbitral ruling. Its Coast Guard even accused the Philippines of intruding into its territory. President Bongbong Marcos acknowledges both nations will continue to defend their positions, leading to what he calls a gray area.
We continue to assert our sovereignty. We continue to assert our territorial rights in the face of all of these challenges, and consistent with the international law and UNCLOS especially. So that is always been our stand, and that will. But we still have to keep communicating with the Chinese government.
And let's go straight to the source of this story. We have security expert Powell. Ray, thank you so much for coming to the studio.
Good morning, Pinky.
Welcome to the program. Okay, I want to start with this. You tweeted sometime, I think mid-July, July 16, that there was this monster ship, as you called it, the biggest ship or vessel of the the Chinese Coast Guard that was spotted around Ayungin Shoal. I wanted to find out from you, is this the same monster ship or the biggest Chinese Coast Guard ship that was involved in the incident last Saturday?
It was not, no. That ship has gone back to China. It actually spends a lot of time in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone and occasionally in Malaysia's. So it was remarkable that it showed up at Mischief Reef for a little while. And of course, it is the largest Coast Guard ship in the world, but it was not involved on Saturday.
What does it do?
Mostly it just asserts China's sovereignty. It patrols, it goes to areas that China wants to send a message that China has overmatch, that it is bigger than you.
Mm-hmm. And indeed it is, because you call it actually a monster ship. So it comes and goes.
It does.
All right. Let's talk about what happened last Saturday. So what did you see? What did you monitor about the incident last Saturday?
Right. So for the last month or so, I've been watching a buildup of Chinese maritime militia ships at Mischief Reef, which is just about 30 kilometers from Ayungin Shoal. And so I thought that was pretty disturbing, and wondering what China was planning for the next rotation mission, because these rotation missions have been something of a catalyst for these kinds of events. Mm-hmm.
And I think that I want to again go back to that July 15 or July 16 tweet of yours with that monster ship. That tweet also said there were about 30 Chinese militia boats there, right?
Yeah, so yes.
Is it the same one that you're talking about?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
So the big ship left, but the militia vessel stayed.
Right, and I should mention that we don't know necessarily from just their broadcasts, their automatic information system broadcasts, that all large ships are supposed to be broadcasting. We don't necessarily know where all the China Coast Guard ships are. So when we found out from the Philippine Coast Guard that there were actually 6 involved in the incident on Saturday, even I was surprised.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what are the 30 or more militia vessels doing there? And also to understand it better, exactly what are Chinese militia vessels? Are they fishing boats? Are they part of their Navy, Army? Are they funded by the Chinese government? What are they? What exactly are they?
Sure. We would call them paramilitary. So they are like an unofficial military. They declare themselves to be fishing boats, but they don't act like fishing. They don't fish. They have reinforced steel hulls. They are there to assert China's sovereignty. They are there to be larger than other countries' fishing boats, or even many of other countries' security boats.
Well, so what is it? They pretend to be fishing boats, but they're not fishing boats.
That's essentially true for a lot of the ones that we watch, yes.
Okay.
Some of the smaller ones might fish sometimes, but a lot of the larger ones never fish at all.
Why the need for the paramilitary vessels?
It's what we call a sort of a civil military fusion. It's a way that China gets around the stovepipes that we put ourselves in, which we say this is civilian, this is military, we don't cross the two. China has no problem crossing the two.
And because if it is of civilian and military fusion, what is its responsibility in the event of a mishap or a problem at sea?
Primarily its responsibility is to assert China's sovereignty. So if there is a problem at sea, it doesn't really have a responsibility. It essentially is there to make sure that everybody knows that China is in charge.
Okay, let me rephrase that question. If this paramilitary vessel gets involved in an accident with a Philippine vessel, what is their responsibility, being a fusion of civilian and military in nature?
So the convenient part for China is they can basically disavow responsibility. They can say, oh, it's just a fishing boat, unfortunate accident, sorry, probably don't say sorry, we'll look into it. So that's essentially how it was treated, yeah.
And what exactly, is there anything illegal about these vessels swarming or staying in these waters?
It is not technically illegal to be in another country's exclusive economic zone. As long
as you're moving.
Well, no.
As long as it's freedom of navigation.
Even so, right? So even so, it doesn't say whether you have to be moving or not. So the restrictions on exclusive economic zones, and all of this area that we're talking about is the Philippines' legal exclusive economic zone. All of the laws, international law is about exploiting resources. So if they do fish, they're supposed to get the Philippine government's permission.
Right.
So this is why we call this a gray zone activity, because they're doing something that's technically legal, but it's clearly intended to assert their sovereignty.
All right. So Saturday, you were saying that you were quite surprised that there were a number of Chinese vessels involved in the incident. What was the water cannon operation really telling the Philippines?
So I think it's important to zoom out and think long-term. What China has been doing at Ayungin Shoal is executing a blockade. So the Philippines has not been able to bring regular materials out to Second Tom Shoal or Ayungin Shoal for a decade or more, really, because China has blockaded that. And so we've seen the pictures already. We saw from the laser incident all the way back in February to the various blocking incidents.
Dangerous maneuvers.
Exactly. Yeah. All of that has been part of China's blockade. What's different now is, thanks to the Philippine government's transparency policy, we are really able to see this very visually now when it happens.
And the end goal really, as China was saying, that there was supposed to be this commitment to remove the BRP Sierra Madre in Ayungin Shoal, to which the former Defense Secretary says, I know nothing about this, Secretary Delfin Lorenzana. Is this a way really of saying, get out?
Yes. So China's whole strategy, the reason they're blockading the Sierra Madre is because they want to make it uninhabitable. So eventually, once the Philippine Navy leaves the Sierra Madre, whether it breaks up, slides off the shoal, simply becomes untenable, that gives China essentially possession of the shoal.
And I wondered about that because it's a World War II era ship. We know as it looks, it's decaying.
Yes.
I wonder how much longer it could actually withstand being there.
Absolutely, and that is China's strategy. China looks at it and wonders the same thing, and what their strategy is, it can't possibly last forever, and this whole problem for China can go away if that ship simply goes away.
And just moving forward with the various comments, and of course the president saying that they believe it's theirs, we believe it's ours, we continue to dialogue. Is there any other approach to show the Philippines anger, condemnation to what China has done to the Philippine vessels last Saturday?
Yeah. So I mean, I think first of all, I think the administration and the government and the military deserve great credit, because what they have done this year is a new approach. This transparency initiative, where they are, I mean, we had drone footage of what happened to the small resupply boat. That was well thought out.
Yeah.
That was so the government deserves great credit.
Right now. Yeah. This one, because this is where you actually see that they were using water cannon. And you know, how dangerous is that?
Well, look at the size of that boat, right? So this water cannon is called a non-lethal weapon, but if it capsizes that boat, that can actually change, and that event could have turned fairly catastrophic.
And could that be considered an armed attack?
It is, so yes, it is a non-lethal weapon in the same way that a laser is a non-lethal weapon. It is a kinetic attack, as we call it, because there is physical force being used against another vessel. Now, if we're leading into the discussion about the Mutual Defense Treaty, that is obviously for the U.S. and the Philippine government, that's a judgment call, right? To what degree do we consider this an armed attack? But also, the Mutual Defense Treaty is also a very flexible thing. So just because you say, well, this invokes the Mutual Defense Treaty, doesn't mean you say, okay, and we're going to show up with an aircraft carrier tomorrow.
So is that also a gray area, using water cannon on
it is
the vessels?
Another of what we call gray zone tactics, yes.
All right. Security expert Ray Powell, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
We'll be taking a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Jay Tarriela. Commodore, a good day to you and welcome back to The Source, sir.
Good day, Miss Pinky, and it's nice to be back.
Sir, balikan ko lang po yung nangyari, no? So reports were indicating that, I think it was August 4, minamanmanan na tayo o minomonitor na po itong mga vessels na pupunta sana ng Ayungin Shoal. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, August 5, when you guys set sail, you were already being shadowed by Chinese vessels. Please tell us what happened, sir.
Yes, Miss Pinky. As early as August 4, around 6 p.m., we already monitor China Coast Guard shadowing the Philippine Coast Guard vessels deployed in Escoda Shoal while we are waiting for the two resupply ships from Palawan. And then the following day, around 7 a.m., when we were about to set sail, the number of China Coast Guard vessels intercepting us, yung sumasalubong na sa amin, has gradually increased. So it started with one, and then another one, and then it ended up having 6 China Coast Guard vessels ang sumalubong sa contingent ng Philippine Coast Guard
parang
at West
talagang obviously planado ito. Alam nila na papunta na po kayo ng Ayungin Shoal.
Yes, ma'am.
How dangerous was it? Because there were stories na, may reports rather, sir, na number one, this one that we're showing right now, I hope I can see that on this screen, ano? That one, tumigil na po yung barko, ito, Coast Guard natin, tumigil, pinatay daw yung, tama ho ba yun, yung makina, dahil kung hindi sasalpok dun sa Chinese Coast Guard vessel.
Yes, ma'am. They conducted dangerous maneuvers, blocking the Philippine Coast Guard, and there is a need for the commanding officer to order the engine to stop at saka mag-backing kasi otherwise babangga sila. It is so close na I think it's less than 10 meters ang reported sa amin. The closest distance na pwede kaming bumangga sa China Coast Guard, Miss Pinky.
Yeah, so talagang kailangan forced to stop. Forced to turn. What else were the other dangerous maneuvers, sir?
The other dangerous maneuver is their attempt to separate yung supply ship
yung
and
dalawa.
the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. Meron kaming video na pinakita yesterday wherein yung China Coast Guard parang super close niya na dun sa buntot ng supply ship na napakaliit. Kasi they intend to separate the Philippine Coast Guard from the supply ship. So those were the dangerous maneuvers that they have been doing to make sure na separated the Coast Guard from the supply ship.
Sir Jay, hindi ho ba gano'n naman talaga yung tactic nila? Kasi ang Philippine Coast Guard talaga, parang siya yung big brother nung itong mga vessels na to, hindi ho ba? Kasi yung maliliit na vessels, sila lang po ang makakapunta doon sa ayungin at magdala ng resupply yung kailangan po ng ating mga tropa doon. Siyempre, hindi naman kaya ng malalaking barko. Ano po. But that's always been their strategy. Am I not right, sir? Am I correct, sir?
Yes, Ms. P. That has always been their strategy. But I think the difference between this resupply mission compared with the previous ones is that this is the first time that they have deployed 6 China Coast Guard vessels. And they used water cannon. The last time they used water cannon was November 2021.
That's right.
During the income in Duterte.
At gabi yun, sir, hindi ho ba, noong 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Opo. This is the second time, even, sir, as I was checking, na ginamit po yung water cannon. 2021 and then now. But in the past months, marami po yung tinatawag na dangerous maneuvers, exactly why we were speaking about this. And of course, months ago, nagkaroon din ng isa namang issue dito sa military-grade laser na hindi po sinasabi ng China that they are denying that it's military-grade. Ano po? Sir, I wanted to find out, well and good, no? It's almost like it's a cat and mouse play. Yung maliit na barko po natin, ginagawa po lahat para makasingit dito sa mga dambuhalang vessel ng China para po makapunta sa ayungin at mabigay po yung kailangan na pagkain at ilan pang kagamitan ng tropa natin doon. Ganun na lang ho ba palagi yung mangyayari? I mean, must we always just try to be strategic, faster, at makatakas po sa kanila para lang po mabigyan ng yung kinakailangan ng mga troops sa BRP Sierra Madre?
Well, Ms. Pinky, we have a lot of responses sa ginagawa nila. We have to highlight that we have been filing diplomatic protests, the diplomatic actions that have always been the primary option. The protests that we're filing, that's the first thing that we do.
Yeah.
Second, of course, etong instance na nag-deploy sila ng mas maraming China Coast Guard to block our resupply. Our counter response probably is to increase the Philippine Coast Guard vessel in supporting the resupply mission of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And then the third one, Ms. Pinky, is to modernize the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine Coast Guard.
In fact,
I support the call of some senators and Congress for the Philippine government to develop our armed forces of the Philippines to have a much more credible defense posture.
Definitely, sir. In fact, yesterday there was a hearing on this by the Senate Committee on Defense headed by Senator Jinggoy Estrada. It was actually very timely because they were also raising their anger and condemnation, yung kanilang galit, no, dito sa nangyari sa last Saturday. I guess I don't think you got my question right. I understand, of course, sir, that we need to file this diplomatic protest. In fact, it was already the DFA saying that it's to be able to clear out the narrative, what really happens there. Because if we do not file diplomatic protest, the narrative of China might stay. Hindi ho ba? Sabi nyo, another tactic is to add more Philippine Coast Guard vessels, no, during these resupply missions. Pero yung akin po, I guess yung tanong ko po, para bang wala tayong masyadong magawa doon sa maliliit nating barko, no? Kumbaga parang, yun na nga, cat and mouse, kailangan madaanan natin sila para lang madating yung tropa din sa BRP Sierra Madre. Para pagalingan eh.
Well, Ms. Pinky, it's important to highlight that the resupply mission of BRP Sierra Madre is a military operation, and the Philippine Coast Guard is only there to support it. If they're going to modify the operation or the delivery of the supplies, the Philippine Coast Guard will just, carry out our mission of providing escort.
Yeah,
but as to modify it, it's for the AAP leadership to decide.
Okay, thank you for that, sir. We just need to take a short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. I'm Pinky Webb. Our source today, PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Jay Tarriela. Sir, last Saturday, the two Coast Guard vessels involved here were the Malabrigo and Cabra. You said that one of the options that government can take to be able to bring supplies to the BRP Sierra Madre is to add Philippine Coast Guard vessels. How many and which ones? Are there bigger ones, sir, dito sa Malabrigo and Cabra?
Yes, Miss Pinky, we have the 97-meter vessel, BRP Melchora Aquino, and BRP Teresa Magbanwa. We also have 183 meters that came from France. That's BRP Gabriela Silang.
Gagamitin na ho ba yun sa susunod? Is that so? I mean, are you gonna add from the two? Will you make it 3 or 4, sir?
That is an option for the national government. We're still going to clear this to the National Task Force West Philippine Sea.
Yeah.
If there is a need for us to increase the number of the Coast Guard vessels to support the resupply mission, the Commandant is committed to add more vessel and to deploy a larger vessel.
Good to hear, sir. I want to go back to that smaller vessel na ginamitan po ng water cannon. Sir, how smaller, what is the size of this vessel?
Those are 44-meter vessels. 4402 and 4409, Miss Pinky.
Not much difference, now these two. So, can they, what can it bring construction materials?
Well, Miss Pinky, the resupply mission, as far as the Coast Guard is concerned, we are only aware that the supply boats are just carrying food, water, fuel, and personal supplies for our crew. I'm not sure whether construction materials are really part of those supplies that were brought by the supply boats.
And even if, for the sake of argument, Commodore, that there were construction materials there, we have every right to even bring them to BRP Sierra Madre.
Miss Pinky, the Philippine Coast Guard is always, responding to the request of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. If ever the AFP or the Department of National Defense and even the National Task Force West Philippine Sea will direct the Philippine Coast Guard to bring the supplies to BRP Sierra Madre, we will be happy to perform that.
Okay. That particular resupply boat na water cannon, sir, I want to find out, how are the people there after?
Well, according to the Armed Forces of the Philippines, they are still, with high morale. They are not afraid to carry out another resupply mission to support our troops on board BRP Sierra Madre.
How dangerous is that, sir? Gaano po kadelikado yan, yung ginawa po nilang pag-water cannon? Pwede ho bang bumaliktad yung maliit na vessel?
Yes, Miss Pinky, that's highly probable considering that this high-pressure water coming out of from that water cannon, and as you can see, this is just an indigenous boat, very light structure. It may not be able to sustain itong direct hit from that water cannon.
That's why I wanted to find out from you, Commodore, because syempre nakikita po natin yan through a drone footage, ano po, and I can just really describe it as I see it. Pero sa lakas po kasi ng tubig na ibinubuga ng water cannon, I wondered how dangerous it was for the people inside that indigenous vessel.
Yes, Miss.
Wala naman pong nasakta, na-injure sa kanila that you know of, sir?
Wala naman daw po, Miss Pinky. It was reported by the Armed Forces of the Philippines that they are still in good shape, and they are all still willing to carry out the next mission.
And our Coast Guard ships, sir, do we have water cannons?
Yes, we have water cannons. The Philippine Coast Guard 44 meters that came from Japan are also equipped with water cannons.
When are they going to be used? What would invoke or push? Ano ho ba yung mga parameters that you would use, or the Philippine Coast Guard would use, the water cannons?
Well, Ms. Pinky, the Philippine Coast Guard water cannons are actually placed there as an equipment to combat, fire at sea, as a firefighting equipment. Some experts, just like what Ray Powell said a while ago, it can also be considered as a non-lethal weapon. But as far as the Philippine Coast Guard is concerned, these water cannons are only used for firefighting capability. So if there are incidents, including fire at sea with other commercial vessels, this is the
Saka lang.
equipment that we use.
Alright.
It's more of, providing search and rescue. In short, we are using that in good use, Ms. Pinky.
Opo. Hindi po pangharas. Hindi po para manakit.
And Ms. Pinky, we don't have the intention to harass anybody.
All right. PCG spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea, Commodore Jay Tarriela. Sir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pinky. I'm always excited to be here in your show. There's an opportunity for us to tell the Filipino people what is really happening in the West Philippine Sea.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.